1973, Lacey O'Neal traveled the world with the International Track Association. 2 days after Palestinian gunmen killed 11 of the Israeli Olympic team in the 1972 Munich Games, Lacey O'Neal walked into the start of the 100-meter hurdle semifinal. An Israeli friend, Esther Roth, was supposed to be in the next lane but was missing. O'Neal cried as she approached the blocks. She didn't know why Roth had been sent home. O'Neal assumed her friend was among the dead. "I thought the games should have stopped," she says. You'll hear more about this story from Lacey O'Neal during today's episode of Think Big. We'll be right back. And welcome to this week's edition of Think Big. I'm your host, Akia Garnett. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm joined today by Olympic hurdler Lacey O'Neal. And Lacey's done one of the most important things that I think many people want to do in their entire life, which is compete on some sort of national stage. And she was able to compete on the Olympic stage, which is a major deal. I don't think most people in the entire human population will ever have the opportunity to do exactly what she's done. And she's here with us this week to tell us the story of how she was able to get there and what her life evolved to after that. Right now, Lacey is mediator for DC Department of Human Rights, and she's also mediator for the DC Landlord and Tenant Court. We'll talk about that as well during this week's episode. Hi, Lacey. How are you?
Hi, Akia. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to a great interview.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here with us. So the Olympics, that's no small thing. How does it feel this many years later to have accomplished what most people will never understand?
Well, I tell you, Akia, when I think about it, it's mind-blowing because as an Olympian, you know, we're once an Olympian, you're always an Olympian.
Yes.
And so every 4 years I get dug up, I say that. So this is a real pleasure. This is an off Olympic year.
Right.
So it still gives me goosebumps. I'm proud to have been an American representing the United States. And I did it twice. And
right.
I did it kind of different from most people.
Yes.
I skipped the whole Olympic and came back.
Tell us about your categories.
Well, I was a hurdler. I didn't start off as a hurdler. As a matter of fact, I got into hurdling as a fluke almost. I was a sprinter, ran the 50, the 100, anything that was fast. And when I was very fortunate to get a scholarship, an academic scholarship to the University of Hawaii, I told my coach one day, I said, I have nobody to run against, so I think I'd like to try the hurdles. I won't need anybody. And she looked at me like, okay, if that's your logic. And so she found me a hurdler coach who coached men. He didn't coach women. Right. So he taught me how to run the men's style of hurdling. But it was enough. And so I was fortunate to, in my bird brain, decided I wanted to be a hurdler, and that's how it evolved.
Had you seen anybody else doing that?
Oh, yes. There were hurdlers, and, you know, it's real interesting because hurdling, back in the day, I'm a little aged right here, but back in the day, it was considered a field event and not a running event. Although Europeans were putting their fast girls in the hurdle event, because most people see it as jumping, but it's not. It's actually running over obstacles. And so I decided I had the speed, and so let me see what I can do.
Did you know when you were a young girl that you wanted to run and compete?
Well, my mother said I came running out of the womb. So she was an athlete herself, and so I would always run. I'd run to her. I almost ran a car down. She was coming home from work, and I think I might have been about 4 or 5 years old, and I saw her coming about a half a block away. And I ran across the street, but she always told me, don't run across the street.
Yeah.
It was a short, distance, but I almost got hit by a car. And when I emerged, not hit by the car, she knew I was a runner because I outran the car.
Wow.
So I always tell people I started running when I was like 4 or 5 years old.
That's a great story.
My mother told me I was a runner.
Right. And so did she sort of instill that in you, and she kept telling you, and is that what you ended up living up to, or?
Well, she was my biggest fan, of course. But I think I really got started at the YMCA in Chicago. I'm from Chicago originally. And they had all kinds of events for children, gymnastics. I did it all. Swimming, I really liked swimming, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But it turned out that track and field gave me the greatest satisfaction because you know if you won or you lost immediately. Right.
Well, it must bring you a lot of joy to see the new champions now.
Yes.
I mean, they're are
phenomenal.
Serious out there.
And they're making money.
Yeah. Yeah.
See,
that came a little after your
pretty much.
Yeah.
We pioneered the professional track. They don't call it professional track now, but it really is. I mean, it's.
Lacey, I want to go inside the mind of an Olympian. What is it like to train?
Training is so individualized, but I trained when I was really serious about making the Olympic team. My coach was really the navigator. I mean, I didn't have much to say about my training the first time, but I suspect you visualize yourself being an Olympian. That's the first step, that you have to be in the top 3. You have to make the qualifying time before you even get to the Olympic trials. It's getting harder and harder now in terms of the qualifying times. When I made my first Olympic, tried out for the first Olympic, it was in 1960. This is when Wilma Rudolph was running.
Right.
Great Wilma Rudolph, who won 3 gold medals in Rome, Italy. But that in 1960, you did not have to have a qualifying time to go to the Olympic trials. And but I did. I made all the times and all, but I missed the making the Olympic team by a lean. My teammate outleaned me. So I told my coach, who was crying, I said, don't worry about it, Coach. I said, in 1964, which is the Tokyo Games, I will make the Olympic team if I have to play tiddlywinks.
Yes.
So I guess the mindset is to visualize, pray a lot, and train. We trained twice a day sometimes. We got ready, and we had a lot of events prior to the actual Olympic trials. I always say I was a utility because I could run so many events. And at the time, they had championships, so we always wanted to win the champion, to be the champion so we can get these large trophies. So I would say an Olympian's mind, you have to feel it within your heart. It has to be something that you really, really want to accomplish first, number one. And you have to visualize it, and then you have to train. Practice, practice, practice.
Right. Wow. So we'll talk about how that same mindset has been applicable to other seasons in your life as we move into the conversation. But if anybody takes the time to really start to research who you are and your background and all of the wonderful things that you've done and continue to do, they'll see that civil rights is sort of a trending line with your history. Can you talk to us about how that is all around the work that you were doing in the Olympics and all those other things that was unfolding in the civil rights movement?
Well, just look at me. I'm black. I'm female. And so those were pretty much two strikes against most female athletes, and particularly when you're black. During that 60s, well, starting in the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, there was always some controversy in terms of female athletes and blacks in general. Mm-hmm. So we had to fight for everything. The men didn't have it as difficult when you read about their history in terms of athletics. But we only had probably that one or two events. We had, categories, as you would call them. Tennis, Althea Gibson was around, but she got a lot of flack, because she became the first black woman to win at Wimbledon. And so there was always something that we had to prove as black female athletes. We didn't get the publicity. As a matter of fact, females didn't get a lot of publicity unless you were someone like, I forget her name, but the first woman to win at the Olympics was a white female. Mm-hmm. But you didn't hear much about the first black woman that won the first gold medal until later on in life. So growing up in Chicago, which was, I always say Chicago is most of the people that came from Mississippi went to Chicago or Detroit. Mm-hmm. So this Emmett Till, during the time I was a young girl, Emmett Till was killed. As a matter of fact, my brother and I were visiting our grandmother in Mississippi when he was killed. And so this has been a part of my life the whole time. And pioneering, I guess, being in the forefront of athletics, the Title IX, we've been fighting for women's rights, black women's rights, female athletes' rights. Yes, I would say that I was always in the forefront in some sort.
Were you carrying a message?
I didn't realize I was, because I was still just in the moment. Mm-hmm. But as I look back, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it definitely, from today's viewpoint, it looks as if there was a message.
Yeah, and I'm happy that I was part of it, and still I feel like I still am part of it. Title IX is still wavering. I was one of the pioneers for Title IX, and now it's being sort of watered down in the school systems. So yes, I need to get back out there and go to Congress and make sure that we don't lose that.
Right. There are so many rules in the Olympics, so many rules, it seems. How did you stay up on top of all of those things so that you would always be in compliance?
I didn't have to worry about it. I had a coach. But I did become a coach at the University of Florida. I became the women's track coach there. So I did have to worry about compliance. But the rules come out, and you just have to be on top of it. If not, you get sanctioned. You lose scholarships. You lose the ability to have your athletes compete. So, and then we have someone, usually schools have someone that's a compliance officer to let you know if you're getting out of line. Mm-hmm. So don't have to worry about that too much.
Right. So, Lacey, set this up for us.
Okay.
You're there and you're running your heart out, and you win. You're among the winners.
Among the winners, didn't get the gold.
Well, you're among the winners.
You're
among the winners. Though. How does that feel?
Oh my goodness.
What is going through your mind at that time?
Oh my goodness, I'm getting butterflies right now thinking about it. You walk into a stadium of approximately 80,000 plus people screaming and yelling, and I could hear my mother, "You better run." But actually, we've been trained to say it's a glorified meet. Mm-hmm. So we don't get too hyped up. And we've already studied the competition. Right. So we kind of know where we are. And so we just try to, if you're number one going into it, you want to stay number one. Mm-hmm. In my case with the hurdles, having just learned how to hurdle and wasn't really feeling that that great about it, but I did make the team, and so I did my best. I actually ran my best. But I was 16th in the world because there were seasoned hurdlers, and the one that won in '64 was from Australia, and I think second place, I believe, was a German girl.
Right.
So, and then the second Olympics that I went to, I was a little bit more seasoned.
Right. And so that was 72, right?
72, right. So, but I still ended up 16th in the world. So, I mean, when you think about all of the hurdlers in the world and you're 16th, that's pretty
bad.
good.
Lacey, that ain't half bad.
No, not at all.
So, what was it like then going back in 72? I mean, you had matured and things had changed in your life. I mean, that's different.
I was an old lady compared to some of the younger ones that I was running against. And so, yeah, it was a challenge because I actually had hung up my shoes, I thought, officially in '65, right after the Olympics. I decided that I want to finish school and make some money.
Right.
Track athletes originally were very poor athletes. It was the poorest of the poor sports. You don't need equipment. You just need your feet. And we even had girls that ran barefooted, and then we grow into a pair of shoes. But in '72, like you said, I was more mature. But I think at that time, trying to get back in shape was the hardest thing for me because I had sort of dissipated. I wanted to be grown at that time. And when I said I was an old lady, the youngest person I ran against was 16, and I believe I was 26 or 27. So,
and you can feel the difference in your performance from the '64 game to the '72 game?
Actually, I was more aware of running over the hurdles. I had sort of perfected it. As a matter of fact, I know I was a better hurdler. The hurdle distance had changed from 80 meters to 100 meters. The distance between the hurdles had changed. So I had to learn how to hurdle all over again when I decided to come back into the sport.
And what was that decision like, deciding to come back?
Everything I've done has been sort of, I think I want to get back to running track again. It wasn't something that I really pondered over.
Okay.
Actually, when I made the decision to run again or to get back in shape again, I was totally out of shape. I had started smoking cigarettes, wanted to be a big girl, drinking, having fun, all the things I thought I had missed being a top athlete. But then one day I woke up, I was actually about 4 or 5 in the morning. I was getting ready to go to watch the Redskins train.
Who's that? Yeah, I like the Dallas Cowboys. So.
Well, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan.
Oh, wonderful. We're among friends.
Okay. But, I decided that some friends of mine, they were driving to, I forget where they were training at this time. It was not too far from D.C. And we were going to go and watch them train. And so I don't know what happened. It's just that I said, you know what? I think I'm going to start training for the next Olympics. And my friends looked at me like, are you crazy? I said, yeah, I think I am. And so I said, you drive the car. I'm just going to run on the street. I'm going to run them out. Now, this is like, honestly, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And I felt my heart I was so out of shape. I said, oh, I don't like this. So I decided to get back in shape. It took me about 1.5 years.
Right.
But,
and your longest distance on running is, what do you just run until you just can't run anymore? Or?
Well, I got up to running 7 miles, but it almost killed me.
Right, and that's a lot for sprinters, right?
Oh, yes.
You're not distance runners.
We're not distance runners.
Right.
And so I was fortunate enough to have a coach that said, Lacey, I think you could do it. Brooks Johnson had started a girls' track team. Actually started off with guys, and then he introduced girls into it. And I had known him. He and Dick Gregory ran together at the University of Chicago.
Wow.
And I had known them when I was like 14 and 15. And so he invited me to, get back in shape again.
Mm-hmm.
And so he treated me really badly because, I still had that championship mentality. But
right.
he said, no, you're not a champion now. You got to start like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I quit the first year. But then I came back, and so in 2.5 years, he got me in good shape, and
right.
I made the Olympic team.
Did you go back into your neighborhood or go back around people that you know and have that champion sort of reception?
Everybody doubted me. They said, "Oh, you can't do this. I mean, you'll never make it." And that's all I needed. I needed for someone to say I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a type of person, when you tell me I can't do something, that's all I need to do is to have that. I'm a competitor. And so you tell me I can't do it. Still now at this age, if you tell me I can't do something, I say, watch me.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe I just had that kind of spirit from a young child. Anytime I was challenged, I would do my best to try to make you out of a liar,
right.
I guess,
Wow, that's
mm-hmm.
very inspiring. You hear people say that all the time, but
mm-hmm.
you have the living proof that you really went all the way with it.
I did it.
You went on to do peace work,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you've done so many other things in your career. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, again, things just happen. I don't know. I wanted to be in the Peace Corps because I thought that was something that I could give back. I guess my whole life has always been, and even in high school when I look back, loving, caring, sharing. I know that's part of my motto.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Peace Corps seemed like something I wanted to do. But, and I met Sergeant Schreiber when I was at the University of Hawaii. This is where they did their first training
mm-hmm.
For the Peace Corps. But he told me, he said, when you graduate, come back and see me. So, and I did. When I graduated, I went back to see him. But at that time, I wanted to work. I didn't want
right.
to go into the Peace Corps. But as it happens, as I stayed here in Washington, D.C., someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, you got to get into politics if you really want to do something in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And so he introduced me to the Republican Party.
Okay.
So I got introduced to the Republican Party, and one day we went on a campaign, and I was sort of like their token black female athlete Republican. And they asked me to give an impromptu speech. I couldn't tell you what I said, but I know I ended with, all my life I've had challenges, and I said, this is just another challenge as a black female athlete, and now Republican, and I got a standing ovation. So at that time, the head of the Peace Corps, Miller Rupee, the heiress of the Miller Highlight
mm-hmm.
beer,
mm-hmm.
was now the head of the Peace Corps. She sent her assistant over to me and he said to me, the head of the Peace Corps wants to speak to you. So I went over and I spoke with her, and she said, how would you like to be in the Peace Corps? And I'm thinking she wanted me to be a volunteer.
Yeah.
And so I said, I've always wanted to be in the Peace Corps, but I have to think about it now because, and I was unemployed at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So she says, no, I'm not talking about being a volunteer. I'm talking about being the director in the Gambia. Oh, not the Gambia. She just said being a director.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a real language. I'd taken Spanish, a little bit of French. So there were no English-speaking countries available.
Mm-hmm.
So for a whole year, I sat at the desk at the Peace Corps office until finally the Gambia opened up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was exactly the country I wanted to go to.
And why'd you say that?
Because I had met some Gambians. I was always into Africa. And I had met some Gambians, and they were telling me about their country, and I wanted to go. And when they said the Gambia was open, I said, oh, God, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up going to the Gambia as the country Peace Corps director, and the tour is actually 2.5 years, but I stayed for 5.
Wow.
So it was a great event.
Wow.
I helped the whole country, so that I thought that was my life.
How did you say yes to that? Because after you're done with the Olympics, I mean, everything is at your disposal. I guess it seems that, anyways, that's the way they paint the picture. Like everything is for your pickings.
It did open a few doors for me,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to remember, there were a number of Olympians that came back with gold medals.
Mm-hmm.
So I was also ran, and so I didn't feel that I could use the Olympics, to open any doors for me. But apparently it did. And I look back in retrospect, but it did open that door for me.
We're here with Lacey O'Neal, Olympian, and we're going to be right back to talk with her about how she was able to leverage her Olympic experience throughout her life.
Hi everyone, Molly Pompadin here with the SOAR Community Network. I'm so excited to share with you a testimonial for Akia Garnett's Think Big program. I was interviewed by Akia just several weeks ago, and we talked about the power of authentic messaging, emotional marketing, and how to really get your authentic, true message out into the market, to your market, your intended audience. And what resulted from that interview, just the day following, was a call from an audience member who just randomly stumbled upon the program, watched the entire thing, and decided the very next day to contact me and the SCN community to talk about how we might be able to help his brand and his business authentically message to his intended audience. So we ended up with a new client, helping our client with vision and mission mapping, helping them soar, and really deciding where he wants to take his business and brand from here. So we're so excited to share that that was possible because we were a part of and were featured on Akia Garnett's Think Big program. So you should check it out, definitely connect with her. She has done some incredible things, featured some really amazing thought leaders, and just a wealth of knowledge and a really good friend. So thank you for all you do, Akia, and I love your program. Keep going.
Thank you for staying with us. I'm Akia Garnett, your host for Think Big, and I'm joined this week by Lacey O'Neal, and she's an Olympic hurdler in the 64 and 72 games. Lacey, so you finally got a chance to go and represent the Peace Corps in Gambia, the Gambia. Mm-hmm. What was that like?
It was a dream come true. I had always wanted to go to Africa. And I was just blessed to get that position. Roots had already come out and talked about the Gambia.
Right.
I'd met some friends from the Gambia. As a matter of fact, I was almost engaged to one. I won't mention his name.
All right.
But, because we had broken up. But when I told him that I was going to the Gambia, now I became part of the Gambian family.
Sure.
And the Gambians are like that. Once you hit that soil and you are friendly, you become family. So I'm an unofficial Gambian, right. I would say. But so one day they will give me the
your honorary.
Honorary, yes. So I'm just waiting on that. But being the Country Peace Corps director, I touched a lot of lives.
Mm-hmm. What was that like? What was that role like?
Oh, my goodness. The volunteers, they do so much. They learn the language. That was a great opportunity to assist these volunteers that many of them live, very meagerly. They slept on cots, straw cots with sponge mattresses. They they worked in the fields. They did a lot of things to help the Gambian women, particularly, and they worked in schools. So my fingers were in a lot of different sectors: agriculture, forestry, economics, just everything. It was the greatest of all the jobs I've ever had. That was, to me, the most fulfilling and the greatest job that I've ever had.
Wow. And can you tell us about who has been and or still is that most important person in your life, and were you able to share those experiences with him or her?
My mom. Mm-hmm. My mom. She's was one of those women that said, I couldn't do it, I couldn't get there, but you have every opportunity. She was always pushing me to be better in whatever it is that I selected. She would never hold back, if she had to borrow money or whatever, if she had to have holes in her clothes, she wanted me to be out front. So, and I did get an opportunity. My mother attended one of the Olympic Games. She came to Africa twice while I was serving over there. So I got to let her see what all of her inspiration did for me, and I wanted to make sure she enjoyed it before she passed on. So.
You said that when you were working for the Peace Corps in the Gambia, that was one of the most, if not most fulfilling roles in your career. Was that the happiest moment of your life?
I would have to say yes, because I felt though that I was doing something positive and that I was actually part of and being able to see something fruitful.
Right.
I guess I'm one of these immediate gratification type people. Mm-hmm. So I was able to see some of the ideas that I came up with, developed, with the assistance of my, staff. Sure. And the volunteers who participated. And I believe that some volunteers didn't think I did a good job, and some thought that I did a great job. So, but I stayed 5 years in the Gambia, so that says something. Usually if you're not producing, they won't let you stay 5 years.
Right. Where did you go after that?
I was unemployed. Mm-hmm. But, again, God was watching over me. The representative from Representative Dimely from California, who's also passed on, wanted to meet the Peace Corps director while I was in the Gambia, and for some reason they kept, they wouldn't let him meet me until he was ready to leave. And when he saw me, he says, "You're black." And I said, "Yes." He says, "Now I know why they didn't want me to meet you." And I couldn't understand. I didn't even know he was in the country. Mm-hmm. He said, "I've been asking since I've been here to meet the Peace Corps director." So finally, he and I talked, and he says, "Well, what will you do when you leave here?" I said, "Well, I want to work with USAID because I want to still work in development."
Right.
So he says, "Well, there's a program that's developing in the State Department. Here's my card." He said, "Call me when you get home, and I'd like to talk to you about it." But before I left the Gambia, I got a call from a young lady who was actually in the Gambia, with her husband. And now she was working with someone. And she called me and she said, "Lacey, you must know somebody in high places because your name has been batted around, and it looks like you're going to be working for the State Department." I didn't even know what capacity I was. I really did not want to work in the embassy. I wanted to be in the field. I'm I hate to say it, but I like the field. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But because I can see my work done.
Right.
But I ended up taking the Foreign Service exam, passed all what I needed to pass, and ended up in the administrative side of the State Department, mm-hmm. and got posted back to Africa.
Which country then?
I got posted. My first post was the Ivory Coast, mm-hmm. but I had to speak French,
right.
And so that was something that I had to work on, and I wasn't able to get the 3-3 level. Ended up getting a 2-2 level. And in the Foreign Service, unless you get exempt, you get 5 years to get tenured. And one of the ways to get tenured, besides your evaluation, is to have a 3-3 in any foreign language. And so because I didn't get that 3-3, I was exited out of the Foreign Service, which was fine.
Right. Did you have any, as a child, any foreign services, foreign languages?
Oh yeah, I took Spanish. I took a little French. I took Micronesia when I went to Hawaii.
Right.
And
some of that stuff goes out the window, right? When
if you don't use it, you lose
right.
it. You know, and so that's pretty much what happened.
Right.
You know?
You talked earlier about how you didn't really see those doors opening after the Olympics. Hindsight is always 20/20, of course, but is there something that could have been done differently? I asked in terms of the way that opportunities were at least made known to you, and I ask this because, and it's not just for athletes, but for many types of professionals, they can tend to look like one-dimensional sort of people. And so for a person who has stood on the Olympic stage and can then talk about foreign services and having, been a director for Peace Corps in Africa, to some it might be difficult to wrap their minds around that, just because we sometimes can look at people in one dimension. Is there something that could have been done differently so that people, would have known, oh, Lacey has the capacity to function in these areas as well, or this particular athlete, even today, let's take someone from, the current set and say, would she, or would he, make a good fit in this particular profession? And I think many people might be surprised to understand how people have developed themselves, especially when they're on the stage for one particular thing.
Well, that's a good question. And I think now there are mentors out there, particularly for track and field athletes. You have to understand, track and field was not a glorified sport except for the Olympic time. That's when we shine. That's when the mostly African Americans shine, because that and basketball and boxing were our field. When I look back in retrospect, I was blessed that I had my coach, my very first coach, Donis Thompson. But again, I thought I would be a teacher, and that's what I started off doing, teaching physical education. I actually taught at Cardozo High School for a minute. I organized the very first interscholastic track and field program for DC, for women or for girls. But I got the pink slip after a couple of years, and started in '69, and '72 I was history. I could have gotten my job back, because at the time Mayor Washington asked me, he said, do you want your job back? And I told him, no, if they don't want me, I don't want them. Which was a little bit immature. Sure. But God had something else for me to do, and my belief, my strong belief in God, has propelled me through to all of these different careers that I've had, or I won't even call them careers, but I feel like I pioneer. People don't stay in jobs very long now. They stay 5 years, but they used to stay 20 years. Right. Some 30 years.
Even 5 years is a long time for many people nowadays.
Yeah. And so I was out there moving from job to job. I thought something was wrong with me. But what it was is that I believe God wanted me to gather all this different types of information and set me up for this job that I have currently, which is a mediator. Because instantly I can identify with diversity, I can identify with cultural differences and, female, male problems, all of these things, because I've interfaced and had so many different types of jobs.
Global experiences.
Yeah, the global experience.
Right.
I really wanted to do what you're doing right now. I wanted to host a show, and I remember I was telling your daughter that communications was my second major when I went to get my master's degree. I did my master's thesis in the cinematography study of two hurdle heights. So I sort of eased into communication. And at the time, the University of Florida did not offer a sports communication degree. So I tried to pioneer that, and I was kind of shut down because, first of all, there were no black females doing sports. There was only one female, Donna De Verona, who was doing color commentating, but not really sports. So you see how we've evolved now. So I was always the first out there, but not getting seriously, taken. So,
but it looks like you've paved the way for many others.
Oh.
And let me ask you,
that was my job.
What
Yes.
what was the most important lesson you have learned in life so far? Would you say?
I would say the most important is trust God. Just get on your knees and ask for guidance. And when it comes to you, act on it. Don't just take it lightly. I tell young people when I speak to them, try to learn your purpose, and your purpose really is your passion. What are you passionate about? Sometimes that's your purpose. It's sort of a way of recognizing what your purpose is. And then ask God to help you to develop whatever it is that you need to do. I mean, you don't know what it looks like, but I always felt that my purpose on earth was to help people because I've been a helper. So everything that I've done has been in a service, sort of like a service, teaching, training, Peace Corps, the job that I took with the embassy, I could have probably been a political or economic person or whatever, but I chose to be one of the lowest, which is the GSO, the General Service Officer.
Why did you choose that?
Because my logic again was, as a GSO, I can work with people. I don't have to sit in an office and be dictated to, and I can have free range, and I can learn a lot of skills, people skills, particularly. So.
Right. Did you see, and are you able to see how some of the elements of your training and mindset back when you were, running, is applicable today to anything that you do? Do you apply the same discipline?
Yes, I do. I mean, discipline is the key word because in any endeavor, you must have that discipline. You must practice your skills, your craft, and you must be on time. I mean, because you can lose out. I mean, even at church, I like to make sure that I'm there when the choir is walking down. I hate being late. I mean, because you can lose a lot just in a minute or a second.
And parents are watching right now, and they are looking at their children and taking them off to practice and all kinds of things, and thinking that they have what it takes, to put them through the Olympic process or the training process. What would you say to them?
Well, if they're young children, let them have fun. Let them grow into the sport. I don't like pushy parents because that turns children off.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of that.
Oh, God, yes. And they end up hating it. And some of these young people could be great athletes and really, I see their future. I see it. But if you have pushy parents and parents that criticize them, and because a lot of parents try to live through their children, which is the wrong thing to do. Let them enjoy the sport. Let them tell you how they feel about it. If they want to change sports, let them change. Sometimes they will come back to that sport. But, and then if you see the potential, you back off and get them a good coach, somebody that has a good reputation, and let that coach work with them.
Has your life been different than what you might have imagined?
Well, yeah, because I came from the ghettos of Chicago. A single parent, raised me. I did get to know my father. Was very pious man. He was a deacon, and he loved church. My mother was just the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
She liked to party. She was a party girl. So here I am in between those two. But yes, I know I had dreams. And, you got to start off with a dream.
Right.
And I didn't know anything about the Olympic Games until my coach told me, you're going to make the Olympic team. And I said, okay.
Do you think that you're still running a race today?
Yes, I think. And the whole idea about running a race, either it's physical or it's mental.
Mm-hmm.
If people see their lives as evolving and not just be satisfied with where they are now, I would encourage people to, I don't care how old you are, what age you are. The Bible tells us that we have 120 years. So why just sit down on your laurels and say this is it?
Right.
If there's something you want to do out there, do it.
You are right now a mediator.
Oh, yeah.
Right. What do you hope to see in the future for your life and for yourself?
Well, again, mediation is really interesting. It's dynamic. Every day I get something new. And so I was telling your daughter again that I'm looking forward to bringing in a different type of mediation. I might look into industry mediation, international mediation. I really do like the idea of bringing people together to see if they can resolve their dispute. So I'm a mediator with human rights, which I get all kinds of disagreements.
Mm-hmm.
I get housing, criminal, racial, ethnics, cultural differences. And then I work with the landlord-tenant court, which is a little bit different. But I'm able to help people resolve their problems just by talking to them and letting them talk to each other.
Right. You mentioned earlier to me, and it may have been before we were on air, that
Mm-hmm.
You've seen your career as somewhat eclectic.
Yes.
You use that word eclectic.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see how all of those great things that you were able to do creates a trend that people can look at and say, this is how I categorize Lacey?
Service-oriented. I'm a servant.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea. The greatest satisfaction I get is when somebody says to me, you helped me
Right.
to think about this. Or a young man came to me when I've even forgotten that I had ever seen him before. And he said, Miss O'Neill, when I was a child, you told me that don't work for anybody, start your own business. I'm about to cry now. And he says, I got my own business, Miss O'Neill, and it just made me feel so good. I don't even remember saying that to him. But at some point in my life, I must have said, don't work for anybody unless you have to.
Right.
Have your own business. So you never know. I mean, people are looking at you. You never know if a child is looking at you or even an adult. I've got kids named after me. I've got 5 children in the Gambia named Lacey.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a white girl came up to me and she said, you inspired me so much, I named my daughter after you.
Mm. So
you don't know who you influence, and so you just have to be right.
Right.
And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but when I'm in the public, I try to be right and try to give something to somebody. That's where I'm from.
Lacey, what I'm taking away from this conversation is the practice concept that you mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
that you have to stay on top of your game. You have to stay, connected and focused and disciplined. And I also took from this humility, and I took prayer and your faith.
Oh.
Is there anything else, as we wrap up this episode, is there anything else that people who are watching should take away from this in terms of how they can use this as motivation to run their own race?
Well, I'm of age. I won't say what my age is, but you can probably find out.
Ladies never say.
So I evolved. I wasn't always as articulate in my feelings, I had to learn this. But stay in the game, even if you think you don't have what it takes. I would say stay in the game. But be passionate about something, right. Whatever it is. I mean, people will say you can't do it, but if you have it deep down in your heart, I would not listen. I mean, I'd listen to my heart before I listen to somebody telling me you can't do it. There's a young lady that I'm sort of mentoring. I call her my goddaughter. She was afraid to tell me what she really wanted to do in life. She said, "You're going to laugh." I said, "No, I won't. I won't laugh." And she said, "I want to be an actress." I said, "Girl, you can do it." Mm-hmm. I mean, she really can, you know. And she went out to California. She's gone out there twice. And she came back. I said, "What did you come back here for?" She said, "It's hard." I said, "Life is hard. But if you really want to do something, you stick with it. But make sure that is what God gave you. If he gave you that dream, if you put it in your heart, you can do it." My goal is to be a multi-billionaire. Okay, everybody heard it. But, you know, if it's in your heart, it's in your heart. Yeah. So stick with it. That's all I have to say.
And I believe you'll get there.
Okay.
All right. I wish you so much success with that. You've run several races. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do that.
Thank you.
Right? If it's a goal, you can accomplish it, right?
Absolutely. I've seen it.
Right.
I've seen it.
You've been watching Think Big. I'm your host, Akia Garnett, and I have been joined this week by Olympian Lacey O'Neal. And you can Google her, find out about Lacey and all the great things that she has done and that she continues to do. I hope you got something really good out of this episode that will help you continue running your own race. We'll see you next time.